I don't know when I started noticing the small things, the way she smoothed the edge of a sleeve before folding it, or how her eyes lingered a second longer when our hands brushed over the suitcase handle. It should have been a simple evening. I was just helping her husband pack, helping them both, really. But somehow, it started to feel like I was standing in the wrong house, holding someone else's life, someone else's goodbye. Her name was Elena. 45. Poised in that quiet way that made everyone else look like they were trying too hard. She spoke softly, but her silences were louder than most people's words. The room smelled faintly of her perfume, something floral, expensive, familiar now. The ceiling fan moved slowly, pushing warm air around the room. Every time she passed by, I could feel the brush of air she carried with her, like the ghost of a touch that hadn't happened yet. "He'll forget his charger again," she murmured half to herself. I nodded, trying to focus on the task. "I'll pack an extra one." Her smile came and went like sunlight through clouds. "You think of everything." It wasn't flirting. Not really. But her tone had this softness, the kind that makes your chest tighten without knowing why. I'd known her for a few months. Her husband, Mark, was my boss, kind man, a little distracted. I'd started helping around the house occasionally when he traveled. Elena always thanked me, always offered coffee. Always made it feel like I belonged there for a little while. But tonight was different. Maybe it was the way the evening light fell across her face, soft amber against her skin, or maybe it was how quiet the house was once the packing was done. Her husband was still in the shower, humming something off-key. It was just the two of us in the bedroom, surrounded by open suitcases and neatly folded shirts. "Do you ever get tired of being the helpful one?" she asked suddenly, eyes still on the suitcase. The question caught me. "I don't mind helping." She looked up then, really looked. "That's not what I asked?" For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. There was something in her eyes, not pity, not playfulness. Just understanding. The kind that cuts through politeness and finds whatever you've been hiding. "I guess," I said quietly. "Sometimes." She nodded slow, as if that answer meant more to her than I intended. She took a step closer, her voice almost a whisper now. "You remind me of someone." "Not him, someone I used to be." My pulse stuttered. Her hand brushed against mine as she reached for the zipper on the suitcase. It could have been accidental, but she didn't pull away immediately. The sound of water stopped in the bathroom. The silence after was unbearable. She finally moved her hand, clearing her throat. "Thank you for helping. I don't think he notices half the things you do." There was something brittle in her smile, something unfinished in her words. I wanted to say something back, anything, but the air between us was too heavy. Mark's voice called from down the hall, light and casual. "Elena, you seen my jacket?" She exhaled, long and quiet. Then she turned to me, her expression unreadable, but her eyes, they lingered. "Stay a moment," she said softly. The bathroom door opened behind her. And in that instant, that fraction of a second before she turned away, I realized it wasn't her husband's leaving that unsettled her. It was mine. The house felt quieter after Mark left, quieter than it should have for a Saturday afternoon. The hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen, steady and low, and sunlight spilled through the half-drawn blinds, striping the counter where I stood rinsing 2 mugs. Elena leaned against the doorway, her arms folded loosely. She was dressed casually, a white linen shirt, soft jeans, but there was something careful about it, like she was trying not to look like she was trying. "You don't have to stay and clean," she said. "I don't mind," I replied, not looking up. "It gives me something to do." She laughed softly, not amused, but understanding. "You sound like me." That line caught me off guard. I glanced at her then. There was a tiredness behind her smile that didn't belong to the woman who always kept everything under control. It was the kind of fatigue that doesn't come from work, but from trying to stay composed for too long. "Mark's trips," she said after a pause, "used to bother me. I'd pretend they didn't, but they did." I dried my hands slowly. "Why?" She looked past me, out the kitchen window. Because when someone leaves often enough, you stop waiting. You just adjust. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. The silence between us felt thick, but not uncomfortable. Her eyes met mine again, steady this time. You've never been married, have you? I shook my head. No, don't, she said, almost smiling. Unless you really mean to stay. It sounded like a joke, but it wasn't. I wanted to ask what staying meant to her, what she'd stayed for, and what she hadn't, but my throat tightened. Instead, I nodded, pretending to understand. She walked closer, reaching past me for a towel on the counter. Her hand brushed my arm, warm and unhurried. I froze, pretending it hadn't mattered, that her skin against mine hadn't sent a pulse up my spine. She didn't move right away. You're jumpy, she said softly, still close enough that I could feel her breath near my neck. I'm fine, I managed. But I wasn't. I'd noticed everything, the faint scent of her shampoo, the small silver ring on her right hand, the way her voice dropped when she said my name. And she noticed that I noticed. Her gaze softened, but then she stepped back, putting distance where warmth had been. You're too young to look at people the way you do, she said, turning away. I wasn't looking, I lied. Yes, you were. We stood there, caught in the truth of it, either moving, either admitting what was already hanging between us. Then, from the table, her phone buzzed, a message from her husband. She didn't read it right away. Instead, she placed it face down, her fingers brushing the edge of the screen like it had interrupted something sacred. When she looked up again, her voice was quieter. You'll still help with the plants while he's gone? Yeah, I said. Good, she murmured. And as she passed by me, her hand, deliberately, unmistakably, grazed mine. Just once. But long enough that when the door closed behind her, the air still felt shaped like her. It started raining that afternoon, one of those slow, deliberate rains that make the world smaller. I'd come by to water the plants like I promised, but Elena was already there, standing barefoot on the porch, watching the sky turn silver. You didn't have to come, she said, though she didn't sound like she meant it. You said the roses needed extra care, I replied, trying to sound casual. Her lips curved slightly. You remembered. She held the door open for me. The air inside smelled faintly of rain and coffee. Something in the room felt different, quieter, more private now that her husband wasn't around. I noticed how her hair had loosened, falling slightly out of its clip, a few strands damp near her temples. I set the watering can down, my hands still wet, and she reached out instinctively, brushing her thumb over a droplet that clung to my wrist. You're freezing, she said softly. Her touch lingered, too long, too gentle to be an accident. Before I could answer, a phone buzzed on the counter. The sound broke whatever had started to build between us. She glanced at it, a message preview flashed briefly. Dinner tomorrow? A name I didn't recognize. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. She locked the screen quickly. Friend? I asked before I could stop myself. Someone from the gallery, she said. Then, quieter. It doesn't matter. The silence after that was sharp enough to cut through the sound of rain. I turned back to the window, pretending to check the plants, but my reflection showed her still watching me, still standing too close. People talk, she said suddenly. You coming here while he's away? I know, I replied. Do you care? Her eyes met mine, a flicker, a hesitation, and then she said, I should. I stepped closer, not enough to touch, just enough to feel her breath. But you don't. Her throat tightened. I could see it in the way she swallowed, the way her fingers brushed her necklace like it gave her something to hold on to. You don't understand, she whispered. You're young. It's different for you. I do understand, I said quietly. Maybe that's the problem. She looked at me then, really looked, and the air between us shifted. Lightning flashed outside, brief and white. Her face was inches from mine now. I could smell the faint trace of coffee and rain on her skin. Every part of me wanted to close the distance, to find out if what was between us was real or just something we were imagining into existence. But she drew in a breath, shaky, unsure, and stepped back. "Don't," she said, her voice almost breaking. "Please." Before I could speak, a knock sounded at the door. We both froze. It was her neighbor, calling through the glass, waving a bag of mail he picked up from her box. Elena smiled too quickly, gathering herself before opening the door. Her tone turned effortless, polite, like she could erase the last 30 seconds with one practiced breath. When he left, she turned back to me. Her eyes were damp, her pulse visible at her throat. "Go home," she whispered. I should have. But I didn't move. Neither did she. And when the next flash of lightning lit the room, we were still there, closer than ever, pretending we weren't. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. By the third, the world outside felt washed out, colorless, like everything was holding its breath. Elena called that evening. Her voice was soft, unsteady. "The leak's back in the guest room. I tried to fix it, but I'll come by," I said before she could finish. When I arrived, the house was dim, lit only by a lamp near the window. She was standing on a chair, reaching for the ceiling, hair falling forward as she pressed the towel against the drip. The moment she turned and saw me, she froze, hands still in midair. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly. "You asked me to." She hesitated, stepping down slowly. The chair creaked, and I reached out, steadying her by the waist. Her skin was warm beneath the fabric of her shirt, her breath catching at the contact. Neither of us moved. Water still dripped somewhere behind us, soft, rhythmic, but the sound felt far away. "I don't know what this is," she murmured. "Neither do I," said. "But I keep thinking about you." Her eyes met mine, startled, searching. "You shouldn't say that." "Why not?" "Because if you do," she whispered, "I won't be able to pretend anymore." She tried to pull away, but I didn't let go immediately. My thumb brushed against her wrist, tracing the pulse that betrayed her calm. "You're shaking," I said. "So are you." The honesty in her voice undid me. I reached up, gently pushing a strand of damp hair away from her face. She closed her eyes for a moment, just a moment, as if steadying herself. "You think I don't feel it?" she said finally. "The way you look at me, like I'm something you're not supposed to want." "I don't think," I said quietly. "I just do." Her breath hitched, a sound halfway between disbelief and surrender. She turned toward me then, close enough that I could see the fine lines near her eyes, the kind that only appear when someone's lived too long pretending they're fine. I wanted to trace them, to learn them by heart. "You don't know what you're risking," she said. "I do," I whispered. "That's why I'm here." Something broke in her expression, resistance, maybe. Or the weight of too many years holding everything in place. She stepped forward, until her forehead rested lightly against mine. Her voice was barely audible. "This isn't right," she said. "Then tell me to stop." She didn't. The silence that followed was fragile, so full it almost hurt. I could feel the warmth of her breath, the nearness of her lips. Every heartbeat was a question waiting for an answer either of us could give. Then a sound. The sharp trill of her phone vibrating against the counter. The name mark glowed on the screen. She drew back as if burned, her hand covering her mouth. I took a step back too, my chest tight, everything we hadn't said trembling in the air between us. She looked at me once more, eyes wet, voice breaking. "If you stay," she said, "I won't let you leave." The phone kept ringing. And neither of us moved. The day after the phone call, Elena didn't answer my messages. I told myself it didn't matter, that what happened, or almost happened, wasn't real. But I kept seeing her face in every reflection, hearing her voice in every quiet space. By the third day, I went to the house anyway. The gate was unlocked. The curtains were drawn halfway, the same way she left them when she wanted the light but not the world. She opened the door before I knocked twice. Her eyes looked tired, her hair unbrushed. She wasn't wearing the calm, practiced smile she usually hid behind. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her tone thin, but her hand still lingered on the door. "Then close it." She didn't. Instead, she stepped back. I walked in, the air thick with something between silence and confession. "He called," she said finally. "Mark. He asked if you've been around lately." My heart stalled. "What did you say?" I lied. Her voice cracked on the word. "And I hate that it felt too easy." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The sound of a dripping tap somewhere in the kitchen filled the air like a metronome counting down. She turned away, gripping the back of a chair. "You shouldn't make this harder than it already is." "I'm not the one lying to him," I said quietly. She flinched, then faced me. "Don't do that. Don't make this about guilt." "What is it about then?" Her answer was slow, deliberate. "It's about wanting something I'm not supposed to." Something in me broke, or maybe it finally clicked into place. I moved closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her even though she wasn't touching me. "Then stop pretending," I said. She exhaled, long and shaky, like someone trying to hold herself together. "You think I haven't tried?" Her hand brushed mine, accidental, desperate. The contact sent a jolt through both of us. She didn't pull away this time. But then she whispered, "There's something you don't know." I frowned. "What?" "Mark," she said. "He's not traveling alone." The words hit harder than I expected. "You mean?" She nodded, eyes glistening. "I found messages. Months ago. I never said anything." I stared at her, anger and sympathy twisting together. "So this isn't revenge," she cut in. "Don't you dare think that. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I believed her. That was the worst part. She stepped closer, pressing a trembling hand against my chest. "You make me remember what it's like to feel seen again," she whispered. "But if we cross this line, I'll lose the little control I have left." "Then lose it," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked between my mouth and my eyes, torn between fear and need. For a heartbeat, the air between us felt electric, full of what-ifs and almosts. Then she whispered, "Tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. A promise." A sentence that felt like gravity. As I left, I could still feel her handprint burning against my chest, proof that whatever we were holding back wasn't going to last much longer. The next evening, the house was dim except for the faint amber light spilling from the living room. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of it, heavy, electric, waiting. She was sitting by the window when I arrived, a cup of untouched tea cooling beside her. When she looked up, her face softened and tightened all at once. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure either," I answered. She smiled faintly. "You should have stayed unsure." But she didn't tell me to leave. I stepped closer, my shoes silent against the rug. Every breath between us seemed louder than words. She rose slowly, the space between us shrinking until there was only a hand's width left, a fragile distance filled with everything we hadn't dared say. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I know. Then why are you here?" "Because you asked me to be." Her breath trembled. "I didn't mean it." "Then tell me that now." She opened her mouth but said nothing. The silence between us answered for her. Her hand lifted, uncertain, suspended in the air, and brushed my collar, smoothing a wrinkle that didn't matter. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a beginning and an ending at once. "I can't remember the last time someone looked at me like that," she said quietly. "Like I wasn't invisible." "You're not." Her eyes shimmered. "You don't know how long I've been trying to believe that." I reached for her hand, fingers trembling slightly as they met. She didn't pull away. The warmth of her palm felt too human, too honest to be a mistake. For a long moment, we just stood there, close enough to feel each heartbeat, to hear the small hitch in her breath every time I shifted closer. "This isn't fair to you," she murmured. "Maybe not. But it's real." Her lips parted, not for a kiss, not yet, but for the kind of breath you take when something inside finally breaks free. She leaned her forehead against my shoulder, and I felt her exhale against my neck, slow, shuddering, surrendering. "You make me forget everything that hurts," she said. "Maybe that's the problem," I whispered. She laughed softly, a sound caught between ache and relief. "You're too young to talk like that. Maybe you make me older." Her hands slid to my chest, resting there, not pulling, not pushing, just feeling. I could sense her deciding, every breath a struggle between what she wanted and what she feared. Then, almost imperceptibly, she tilted her face up toward mine. Time slowed. I could see every detail, the faint scar on her lip, the glint of light in her eyes, the quiet trembling that betrayed everything she was trying to hold back. And just as our lips were about to meet, she whispered, "If this happens, I can't go back." I closed my eyes. "Neither can I." The space between us disappeared. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was fragile, two people finding the thing they shouldn't have been looking for. When she finally drew back, her voice was barely a breath. "Now you know." And I did. Because in that moment, in the way her hand stayed on me, in the way her eyes didn't, I understood everything we'd both been running from. This wasn't about right or wrong anymore. It was about being seen, and finally, painfully seen back. The morning light came slow, pale, almost forgiving. The air was still damp from the rain, carrying that quiet scent of renewal that always follows a storm. Elena stood by the open window, the soft breeze brushing strands of hair across her face. I watched her from the couch, unsure if I should speak. Everything between us had changed, and yet, in that fragile silence, nothing felt wrong. She turned, eyes gentle but tired. "You stay," she said. "I didn't want to leave." Her smile was faint. "I'm not sure I wanted you to." For a moment neither of us spoke. The world outside went on, cars, birds, the faint hum of morning, but it all felt far away. She walked over, her bare feet silent against the floor, and sat beside me. The air shifted, everything slowed. "I spent years pretending I was fine," she said. "Perfect, composed, unshakable. But the truth is—" She hesitated, then exhaled. "The truth is I forgot what it felt like to be alive. You reminded me." I looked at her, really looked. "You did the same for me," I said quietly. "You made me stop waiting for the right moment." She reached out, fingers brushing the back of my hand, tentative but sure. "You know this won't be easy. I'm not asking for easy." Her hand slid into mine then, slow, deliberate, the kind of gesture that doesn't need words. Her skin was warm, her pulse steady. I felt her leaning closer, until her head rested against my shoulder. We stayed that way, the morning light spilling across us like a promise. "Do you regret it?" I asked. She was silent for a long while, then shook her head. "No. Just afraid of how much I don't." I smiled softly. "Then don't." She looked up at me, eyes glistening in the light. "You'll still think of me when this gets complicated?" "I already do," I said. A quiet laugh escaped her, tender and trembling. She shifted closer, her hand finding the back of my neck, pulling me into a small, wordless moment, not a kiss this time, just her forehead resting against mine. The kind of closeness that doesn't need to prove anything anymore. The clock ticked somewhere in the background. The world would find its way back in, it always does, but for now, there was only the soft rhythm of her breathing and the feeling that, somehow, this was what peace felt like. She whispered, "Stay for breakfast?" I nodded. "If you make the coffee." She smiled, that quiet, real smile I'd been chasing without knowing. "Deal." Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, casting light across the floor where our hands were still intertwined, steady, human, unhidden. For the first time, nothing about it felt wrong.